Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, please hit the subscribe button down below. I believe it's in the bottom right hand corner, and give this video a thumbs up so it reaches out, in the algorithm. October is Domestic Abuse Awareness Month. So I found this case, very fitting to talk about despite the sad circumstances. And it's a case that I was aware of for maybe the last 2-3 years. But what brought it back to the forefront for me now, anyways, is one of the pages that I follow, on Instagram for the family. They shared, the other day that the perpetrator, even though he's been arrested and charged and convicted, he's filed his second appeal. The first one is in February of 2022 this year, but I think he filed it late because after your sentence, you have a certain amount of time where you can file your appeal. He filed his late, so it was denied. And then the second appeal was filed. I'm not sure when it was filed, but he had a date on October 4th. And thankfully, that appeal was denied once more. So let's just get into the case. Now, Arianna Goberdhan was 26 years old. She was a newlywed. She had just gotten married on November 6th of 2016. She got married to her husband, Nicholas Baig. I'm not sure how it's pronounced, Baig. It's a Guyanese last name. This is a Caribbean family. He was Guyanese. Arianna was Trinidadian or a Trinidadian background. So they got married. They were together for 6 years prior, but the relationship was very abusive. Physically, mentally, he's very controlling, manipulative. And while Arianna's family was aware of some of the incidents, they didn't have the full scope of what was going on, because a lot of it Arianna kept to herself, and she thought that she could change him.
My sister, that was my only niece. She came to me for everything. I tried to help her as much as I can, but she just told me I can help him, I can save him.
Know the extent of the verbal or the physical abuse because she kept it hidden. She kept it hidden from us. I think she was just afraid to even say anything to her dad and I.
Like a lot of victims do. They think that they can change the abuser. But, unfortunately, on April 7th of 2017, and before I even get there, I'm jumping ahead of myself, Arianna was 9 months pregnant with her first baby, a daughter she named Assara. This would have been the first grandchild for her parents. On her side of the family, it would have been the first grandchild. Because Arianna, I believe she was the eldest, and then she had a younger sister. So after Arianna and Nicholas got married, they moved into his parents' house in Pickering. But 3 months later, in January of 2017, Arianna moved back to her parents' house in Ajax, because at this point, the relationship had just, broken down even more. And the fact that she was pregnant, certain things that I guess she could have handled before, she just wasn't putting up with it anymore. So even though they were separated in that sense, she would still go back and forth. Like, she would spend time at his house and, she'd go back and forth. So 1 week prior to her on a live-in, Nicholas had went to her house, and I guess he couldn't gain access. She wouldn't let him in. They were in an argument. So she refused to let him in. He broke down the door. And as per usual, most of his life, he did his shit and he got away with it. He promised to fix the door, and that was the end of that. On April 7th, 2017, Arianna, 9 months pregnant, a big belly, 9 months pregnant, he called her to pick him up at work. And this is something, because he was employed sporadically throughout their relationship, since he left high school. So on this rare occasion, he actually had a job. And he called her to say, come pick me up at work. But unbeknownst to her, he had already gotten a ride from his brother. So I guess on her way to his job, he probably called her and said, you know what, I'm at home, or I don't know how that went, but she ended up at his house. And when she left her house, this is around 6 6:30 in the afternoon, she actually took her dad's car so she would have an excuse, in case, things escalated between them. She would have an excuse to leave and say, yo, I have to go take my dad's car back. So she ended up at his house, and at about 9:42 p.m., 911 got a call. But Arianna wasn't talking to them. She just called 911 and left the line open. So they could hear what was going on in the background, and they could hear that she was terrified because she was saying to him, you can't keep me here. I have to leave. I have to go home. I can't stay here in the moment that you're in. But then the call ended. I forgot to mention that after the call ended, 911 did call back, which is their protocol. And Arianna confirmed to them that she did need help. And the call ended again. But luckily, because when she had moved into his house, she had changed all her billing to reflect his address. So when she moved back, I guess she didn't have the opportunity to switch it back. So when they traced her cell phone, it went to his house. And that's where they went. But when they got there, there were no cars in the driveway. No one was answering the door. But shortly after, Nicholas' brother came. I don't know if that was by pure coincidence or Nicholas had called his brother and say, yo, something went down at the house. You need to get back there, But he opened the door and he ran up to his brother's room and found Arianna there unresponsive. Sadly, she was already gone. And her daughter went with her. Arianna was stabbed 17 times. 17 times.
According to the agreed statement of facts, Goberdhan visited the home that night around 6:30 and hours later called 911 terrified. It was immediately after that call that Baig stabbed Goberdhan to death. She sustained 17 stab wounds, 7 to her torso, 7 in the head and neck, and 3 in her arm.
And while the baby wasn't physically injured, once the mother stops breathing, so does the baby, unfortunately. If they had gotten there sooner, well, we can't even say that because we don't know at what point she, And Nicholas went on the run for a day. He was caught the next day. When he left, he took Arianna's car, her dad's car. That's how he got away. But he was caught the next day, charged with 1 count of first-degree murder, because in Canada, when you unalive a pregnant woman, a pregnant mother, you're only charged with the death of the mother, not the baby.
Daughter, whom she'd already named Assara, died with her. Though under Canadian law, the unborn child isn't recognized as a separate victim, and Baig was not charged with her murder.
It doesn't matter how far along you were. Because like I said, Arianna was 20 days away from her due date. This baby was perfect, healthy.
She was like, she couldn't wait for her baby to come. She was telling her dad, make sure everything is ready because we were changing the hardwood floor. I think the baby's coming this weekend. When she left the house at around 6:30, she was just excited. Everything was ready for the baby, the crib, the change table, everything. She had already washed the clothes, ironed it up, packed her bag to go to the hospital.
I had the baby shower for her and she was ecstatic. She took 900 pictures on that day.
If she was born that day on April 7th, 2017, she would have survived. But she was taken out by her own father. Her own father did this to her. Nicholas was a drug addict. He did, alcohol, weed, cocaine. But that's not an excuse for what he did. This was who he was in his core being. That's just the type of person that he is. Even his own mother, when they were in court, the pre-sentencing report, and I will link that report down in the description box on Canly. You guys can go through and read everything. His own mother testified in court that at one point he had locked her in a closet. I guess they were in an argument. I don't know what the situation was, but he pushed her in a closet and then jammed the door outside so she couldn't get out. So this was something he was known for. He was known for abuse, and it seems to be geared towards women especially. Not even his own mother could get away from that. But then the audacity of the situation, the same mother that testified to that said that, was in court still saying, we will be here to support him. We are here to help him. I guess because they wanted him to get less time than he did. But this is who he is. This is his core. He's not going to change. I doubt it. I doubt it. But I could be wrong. I've been wrong before. It would be nice if he would, but he was given life in prison. But again, in Canada, that's just there on paper to sound good. There's no such thing as a life sentence in Canada. There are very few people who have gone into a Canadian jail and actually spent a life. They get out after serving a specific time. Like Nicholas, he can get out after serving 17 years. He can apply for parole then. Doesn't necessarily mean he'll get it at the 17-year mark, but he will get out of jail at some point if he doesn't die there first, while editing this video, it just hits me. She was stabbed 17 times and he's eligible for parole after 17 years. I don't know if that was a coincidence or that's why the judge saw it fitting for him to get parole after 17 years. I'm sure the family will be there at every parole hearing, and hopefully that delays the time, that he comes out. But we'll see. I'll keep an eye out on this case for sure. And he's already filed 2 appeals, like I said. He's not even allowing the family to grieve. He pled guilty. He was charged with first-degree murder. He pled guilty to second-degree murder. And in a way, I kind of think that this was something that was planned. Because why would you lie to her and say, come pick me up from work, and then you have your brother take you home? I think he lured her to the house. He had plans. And again, I could be wrong. I've been wrong before.
I mean, her sentencing report clearly showed that he had no remorse, that he premeditated what he did, and it was such a violent act. Like, this is the only time my husband and I actually knew what took place that night, and it was so violent.
But that's just something I think, because what he said was, I wanted her, I was trying to prevent her from leaving that night. But why would she want to leave unless you were doing something to make her uncomfortable? There are messages, I'll put them up on screen right now, that he used to tell her, I don't want you to be existing in this world anymore. I don't care if when you go into labor, you don't survive. I don't want to be a part of this baby's life anymore.
Court heard in the months leading up to Arianna's murder, Begg engaged in a hostile text exchange with the soon-to-be mother of his child, writing, I really don't want to be married to you. I don't want nothing to do with you or this baby anymore, and I hope you die delivering.
These are things that he would send to her, and she would take a screenshot and send it to her father. I guess to document the abuse. Domestic abuse has no race. It has no gender. It doesn't matter how educated you are. Because Arianna, if I didn't mention it before, she was a graduate of Brock University. She used to work at a bank, I think at TD Bank. She volunteered in the community. While she was in school, she used to volunteer at YWCA, which is a shelter for abused women. So she knew what the signs were. She knew what to look for.
She worked at the YWCA in St. Catharines throughout her years at Brock University. And so she knew firsthand what domestic violence is about. And she knew what she was facing. But I guess for her, as Carissa is saying, that she thought that she could change him. And really in situations like these, you cannot. You have to leave.
So ironic, because Arianna at university, she would volunteer at a women's shelter, the YWCA. And so she knew, and it's just, but she was a victim.
But when you're in that relationship, it's hard to get out of it. It has I don't know how to explain it, but those that have been in abusive relationships, they can testify to it more than I can. Because it's not like when you go into the relationship, immediately it starts like that, where you can say, boom, I'm out. I have nothing invested. They love bomb you, and once they see, okay, her feelings are invested, that's when they'll start. It might start with a little hit or a little insult, and then they apologize. Might start to act good for a certain amount of time, and then they go right back to who they were. They go right back to it. And they always say the most unsafe time for any victim is when they're about to leave. And I think she was getting to her breaking point. She was bringing a new life into this world, and she did not want her child to be consumed by this abusive man, her abusive father, because that's not something that she grew up with. But I don't know, it's just sad. And then now he wants to get out of jail quicker than, and while he's been in jail, he's already doing things to make himself look good on paper. So when he goes up for parole, that's the trick. They go in and they start to take, I'm taking anger management classes and this and that and whatever. So when they go to the parole board now, they have a list of, they have an itinerary of things to present and say, I've changed. This is what I've done. This is what I'm doing to better myself. And then they get out and they go right back to doing the same things. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen in this case, but it's what I've seen time and time. I can't even talk, but it's things that I've seen before. But it's a sad story. Like, she was 9 months pregnant. 9 months pregnant. If she had went into birth that day, or went into labor that day and given birth, that baby would have been alive and fine. And then the Canadian law, he can't be charged for the murder of that baby as well, because she wasn't born yet. I'm getting upset. But have you guys heard about this case?
My granddaughter and my daughter were murdered, but the murderer was charged with one count of murder. Arianna Goberdhan, she was brutally murdered by her husband, and at the time, she was 9 months pregnant. Arianna was so full of life. She was a joy to be around. When she found out she was pregnant, she was ecstatic, because this was her baby. She wanted to have a baby. For 9 months, Arianna made sure she went to every doctor's appointment. She ate properly. She slept. She took her vitamins. She did everything that she could to make sure that her baby was perfect. And me, as a grandmother, I was so excited. I talked to her tummy almost every day. Nanny is here waiting for you. I just couldn't wait to hold her in my arms. This child moved in my child's tummy. I went to every ultrasound with her. I saw her with her little finger in her mouth. I saw her smile inside my daughter's tummy. Assara was 9 months, and I'm so happy that my daughter had named her, because now we have a name. Now we could say that we have a name to our granddaughter. The name would have been Assara. April the 7th, when it happened, when we got the call from the police, I thought, oh my gosh, something happened. She went into labor, something like that, never knowing that this was the outcome. This is what happened. This is what he did to her. He didn't do it just to her, but to his child as well. And for this law to say that my granddaughter wasn't a human being is so wrong. Because when we saw her 5 days after the fact, she was perfect. She had the most beautiful complexion. Her eyelashes were so long, her fingers were so long. So when we saw her lying in her mother's arms in the coffin, that image will be forever etched in my mind. It will forever be the baby that I look forward to holding, the baby that I look forward to being part of me and part of my life and part of my family's life is now gone.
And to think that that life was taken by someone and he's not responsible, and he's getting away scot-free with that death is wrong on all levels.